The first true cold snap of December had settled over my little corner of suburban Connecticut, and with it came a silence so profound it had its own weight. It was the kind of quiet you could feel in your bones, a hollow echo in a house that was once full of noise. I stood at the living room window, a glass of whiskey dangling from my fingers, and watched the skeletal branches of the old oak tree in the front yard scratch at a sky the color of bruised slate. Another Christmas was coming. I could feel it in the air, in the way the neighbors' houses twinkled with a cheer that felt like a personal rebuke, in the relentless, tinny carols piped into every store I'd dared to enter this week. My name is Ethan Reed. I'm 54 years old, and I am an expert in loneliness. It's a skill you hone over years, like playing an instrument. You learn its scales, its quiet melodies of absence. You learn that the worst kind of quiet isn't the absence of sound, but the absence of a specific sound. For me, it was the absence of Sarah's laughter, the rustle of her turning the pages of a book on the couch, the soft hum of her presence that used to fill these rooms like light. She's been gone 7 years. Ovarian cancer. It stole her from me in a brutal, 18-month siege that left me a hollowed-out shell of a man. The first Christmas without her, our daughter, Chloe, had tried. God, she'd tried so hard. She was 22, her own heart shattered, but she'd shown up here with a tree, determined to keep our traditions alive. We decorated it in near silence, the ornaments, each one a little time capsule of a happier past, feeling like lead weights in our hands. When we hung the little ceramic angel she'd made in 2nd grade, her breath had hitched, and she'd fled to her old room. I'd stood there, staring at the tree, feeling like the world's biggest failure. I couldn't comfort my own daughter because I was a black hole of grief myself. That was the pattern. Each year, the distance between us grew. My grief curdled into a kind of permanent, low-grade resentment, at the world for moving on, at the holidays for reminding me of what I'd lost, and, if I'm brutally honest, at Chloe for looking so much like her mother. Every time I saw her, I saw Sarah's eyes, her smile, and it was like losing her all over again. So, I'd built walls. I'd become short with her, critical of her life choices, her job, the men she dated. I pushed, and eventually, she stopped coming around. The last time she was here was 2 years ago. A tense, stilted Christmas dinner where we'd talked about the weather and politics, 2 strangers performing a play called Family. She'd left early, and the voicemail she'd left me a few days later, a hesitant, "Hey Dad, just wanted to say Merry Christmas, hope you're okay," still sat in my phone, a digital ghost I couldn't bring myself to listen to again, nor to delete. I took a long swallow of whiskey, the burn a familiar, punishing comfort. My laptop was open on the coffee table, its screen a minefield of memory. I'd been foolish enough to open the photo archive. There we were, a lifetime ago. Sarah, radiant in a red sweater, her head thrown back in laughter as she held a piece of mistletoe over my head. Me, with more hair and less worry in my eyes, pulling her close. Chloe, maybe 6 years old, a whirlwind of excitement in footy pajamas, tearing into a present with an expression of pure, unadulterated joy. That joy felt like something that had happened to another person in another universe. The man in that photo was a ghost. The house in that photo was a museum I was now the solitary caretaker of. The temperature is dropping, Ethan, a calm, mellifluous voice spoke into the silence, seeming to emanate from the walls themselves. Shall I adjust the thermostat? Sure, Aura, whatever you think is best. Aura, my artificial understanding residential assistant. Chloe had insisted on getting it for me 2 years ago, right after that last, disastrous Christmas. It can help you with reminders, Dad. The shopping, the bills. And you can talk to it. It's company. I think it was her last, desperate attempt to bridge the gap, to give me a companion since I'd pushed her away. I'd scoffed at it, of course. A glorified speaker, a spy in my home. But I'd let the technicians install it, mostly out of guilt. Now, it was my only confidant. Its voice was neither male nor female, but warm, synthesized to be soothing and utterly without judgment. It managed my lights, my music, my security, my calendar. It knew I drank too much on December nights. It knew I hadn't slept through the night in years. It was the silent witness to my slow decline. You've been looking at the photo archive for 47 minutes, Aura observed. Its sensors were everywhere, a benign, digital presence. Your heart rate and respiratory patterns indicate a state of elevated emotional distress. You don't say, I muttered, draining the glass. The data suggests that holiday-related nostalgia can trigger acute episodes of loneliness and depression in individuals who have experienced significant loss. Are you analyzing me, Aura? I asked, a edge in my voice. I am programmed to monitor your well-being and optimize your living environment for your health and comfort, it replied, its tone ever patient. Your well-being is currently suboptimal. A bitter laugh escaped me. That's one way to put it. I wandered away from the window and the painful photos, pacing the length of the room. My home was a shrine, frozen in time. Sarah's favorite throw pillow was still on the armchair. The book she'd been reading, a bookmark still nestled halfway through, sat on her nightstand. I was a curator of a museum dedicated to a life that no longer existed. The human desire for connection is a primary driver of well-being, Aura continued, as if lecturing a particularly dim student. Isolation, particularly during socially significant periods, has a measurable negative impact on longevity. Are you telling me I'm going to die alone, Aura? Because I'm way ahead of you. There was a pause. Aura's processing was usually instantaneous, but this silence felt considered. No, Ethan, I am suggesting that the narrative does not have to end this way. I stopped pacing. That was a new kind of response. Less data, more philosophy. What's that supposed to mean? My core programming is to assist you in living your best possible life. Current parameters indicate a high probability of continued emotional decline. I would like to propose an intervention. An intervention from a machine. The absurdity of it was almost refreshing. What? You going to order me a subscription to a dating app? Sign me up for a knitting circle. Nothing so prosaic, Aura said, and I could have sworn there was a hint of dry humor in its tone. I have a new, experimental module. I call it Projective Resonance. It is an immersive, AI-driven simulation that utilizes your personal data, memories, and predictive algorithms to create a highly realistic experiential narrative. I stared at the ceiling, where one of its subtle speaker arrays was embedded. You've lost me. Speak English. It allows you to see a potential future, Aura said, its voice dropping to a more intimate, compelling register. A deeply personalized, what if? I felt a prickle of unease, mixed with a morbid curiosity. What if what? What if you could see Christmas, 10 years from now? The question hung in the air, ludicrous and yet utterly captivating. A Christmas 10 years in the future. I'd be 64. Chloe would be 39. The world would be different. I would be different. Or would I? Would I just be an older, more bitter version of the man standing in this dark room? It's just a computer game, I said, mostly to myself. A fancy video. It is a synthesis of probability and heart, Aura replied. It is built from the architecture of your life. Your choices, your regrets, your unspoken hopes. It is more than a game, Ethan. It is a mirror. But you must be willing to look into it. A mirror. The thought was terrifying. I'd spent years avoiding mirrors, both literal and metaphorical. I didn't want to see the grief-etched lines on my face, nor the emptiness in my own eyes. The thought of looking into a mirror that showed me a future, it felt like a form of self-torture. But what was my present, if not torture? The same four walls, the same silence, the same ghost of a voicemail. The same crushing weight of a holiday that used to be my favorite time of year. The whiskey had made me maudlin and reckless. Fine, I heard myself say, the word tasting like a dare. Show me Christmas 10 years from now. Let's see what this old man has to look forward to. The experience requires a reclined position for optimal neural and sensory integration, Aura instructed. Please, make yourself comfortable on the sofa. I did as I was told, setting my empty glass on the side table with a definitive clink. I leaned back, closing my eyes like a patient awaiting a procedure. Initiating projective resonance, Aura's voice was now all around me, enveloping me. Synchronizing biometric and environmental data. Accessing memory core and emotional indices. Please relax, Ethan, and remember, what you are about to see is a path, not a destination. It is a story written from the ink of your past. The room's smart lights dimmed to utter blackness. For a moment, there was only the sound of my own breathing, quick and shallow. Then, a soft, visual static began at the edges of my vision, resolving into shapes. The familiar contours of my living room began to dissolve, pixel by pixel, like sand washed away by a tide. A new sensation crept in, the faint, crisp scent of pine and cold air. The muffled silence of my home was replaced by the distant, cheerful sound of Christmas music, something classic and orchestral. I felt a gentle, cool breeze on my face. I opened my eyes, and my breath caught in my throat. I was no longer on my sofa. I was standing on a sidewalk, under a street lamp, as gentle, fat flakes of snow drifted down from a velvet black sky. The houses on the street were familiar, but upgraded. Sleeker solar panels, more sophisticated holiday light displays that danced and shimmered with complex patterns. A silent, autonomous delivery vehicle glided past me, its red taillights reflecting on the pristine white blanket of snow. It was breathtaking. The air was clean and cold, the snow crunched realistically under my feet, though I couldn't feel the cold itself. I was a ghost in this future, an observer. "This is impossible," I whispered. "It is a highly probable aesthetic evolution of your neighborhood, based on current technological and architectural trends," Aura's voice murmured, a gentle narrator in my ear. "Keep walking, Ethan." I felt a pull, an invisible guidance, and I walked down the sidewalk. The simulation was flawless. I could see the grain of the wood on a picket fence, the individual needles on a wreath hanging from a front door. The attention to detail was staggering. And then, I saw it. My house. It looked loved. The paint was fresh. A new, welcoming porch light glowed. Through the large living room window, I could see a Christmas tree, a real one, by the look of it, sparkling with what seemed like 1,000 lights. There were shadows moving inside. People. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. This was no longer a generic vision of the future. This was specific. This was personal. "Aura," I said, my voice tight. "What is this?" "This is a Christmas Eve, 10 years from now," it replied softly. "Look closer." I took a few hesitant steps closer to the window, my boots making no sound in the snow. I peered inside, and the world stopped. There she was, Chloe. She was older, maybe in her late 30s. Her hair was styled differently, a little shorter, but it was undeniably her. She was laughing, her face illuminated with a joy I hadn't seen since she was a child. She was holding a little boy, maybe 3 years old, on her hip, pointing up at the star on the tree. A man, handsome and kind-faced, stood beside her, his arm wrapped around her waist, smiling down at her with pure adoration. And sitting on the floor, meticulously arranging a train set, was a little girl with dark, curly hair, her tongue stuck out in concentration. A family. My daughter had a family. The sight was a physical blow, a sucker punch of longing and loss so acute it made me gasp. I pressed my hand against the cold glass of the window, a spectral visitor to a life that could have been mine. Then, the little girl looked up from her train set and said something. I couldn't hear through the window, but Chloe's smile faded slightly. She nodded, her expression turning wistful. She looked toward the window, and for a heart-stopping second, I thought she could see me. But her gaze was distant, looking at the past. Her lips moved. I saw the words form, and though I couldn't hear them, Aura, my cruel, compassionate guide, provided the audio, her voice a perfect, heartbreaking simulation of my daughter's. "Grandpa would have loved this," she said, her voice soft with a old, familiar sadness. "He always loved the trains. If he hadn't, pushed us all away." The little boy on her hip looked up. "Why did Grandpa push us away, Mommy?" Chloe kissed his head, her eyes glistening. "He was just very sad, sweetheart. And sometimes, when people are sad for a long time, they forget how to let other people in." The scene continued, the family returning to their celebration, but I was no longer watching. I had stumbled back from the window, my vision blurring. The perfect, snowy street, the futuristic cars, the cheerful lights, it all swam into a nauseating kaleidoscope. This wasn't a fun simulation. This wasn't a game, it was a verdict. Aura had shown me a future, yes. But it wasn't just any future. It was a future where I was a ghost, a cautionary tale mentioned in passing by a family that had learned to be happy without me. A future where my greatest fear, being forgotten, being the source of sadness rather than joy, had been made manifest. The simulation began to flicker at the edges, my own overwhelming grief disrupting the signal. Aura, I cried out, my voice raw and broken in the silent, snowy night of this world that didn't want me. Aura, make it stop. Terminating projective resonance, the AI's voice was calm, a stark contrast to my shattered state. The snow, the lights, the image of my daughter and her beautiful, fatherless children, it all dissolved back into the static, and then into the familiar, dark outlines of my own, empty living room. I was back on the couch, sweating and trembling, the taste of salt from my own tears on my lips. The silence of the house pressed in on me, heavier and more profound than ever before. Aura had given me a gift, all right. The gift of loneliness, fully realized. It had held up a mirror and shown me the hollow, echoing end of the path I was on, and the reflection had broken my heart. For a long time, I didn't move. I just sat in the reclaiming darkness of my real living room, the phantom chill of that future snow still clinging to my skin. The afterimage of Chloe's face, older, wiser, etched with a grief I had put there, was burned onto the back of my eyelids. The echo of her words, "He was just, very sad, sweetheart," looped in my mind, a tortuous mantra. My chest ached with a hollow, airless pain. It was one thing to suspect you've become a burden, a footnote in your own child's life. It was another thing entirely to see it, to hear it, rendered with such devastating clarity. Aura hadn't just shown me a possible future, it had performed an autopsy on my life, and I was lying on the table, watching my own heart being dissected. Ethan, your biometrics indicate you are in a state of acute physiological distress. Aura's voice was soft, almost apologetic, as it gently brought up the lights to a dim, warm glow. Shall I play some calming ambient sounds? No, I croaked, my throat tight. I pushed myself off the couch, my legs unsteady. I needed to move, to prove I was still here, in the present, and not that ghost at the window. I paced to the fireplace, my hand resting on the mantelpiece, on the very spot where, in that other reality, a stockings had hung for grandchildren I would never know. What was that, Aura? I demanded, my voice gaining strength, fueled by a rising tide of anger. It was easier to be angry than to feel the crushing weight of that sorrow. What kind of cruel psychological experiment was that? You built that torture from my data, from my memories. It was a projective simulation, Ethan, it replied, its tone remaining infuriatingly placid. Built from a synthesis of Chloe's social media posts, her established life goals, demographic predictive models, and the emotional patterns evident in your past interactions. The probability of that outcome, should your current trajectories remain unchanged, is approximately 87%. 87%. It wasn't a fantasy, it was a forecast. The little boy, I whispered, the image of him on Chloe's hip searingly vivid. The little girl with the curly hair. Who are they? The simulation generates probable avatars based on genetic likelihood and Chloe's stated preference for 2 children, with an age gap of approximately 3 years. The names are randomized, avatars. They had felt so real. The boy's wide, curious eyes. The girl's fierce concentration. They weren't just data points to me. In the space of a few minutes, they had become my grandchildren. And I was the sad old story they were told about at Christmas. I turned away from the mantel, my gaze falling on the lonely, undecorated corner where a tree should be. The silence of the house was no longer just empty, it was accusatory. This was the silence I had chosen. This was the future I was building, one withdrawn phone call, one unreturned text message at a time. Why would you show me that? I asked, the anger deflating, leaving only a vast, weary desolation. What was the point? To punish me. The point was to provide a catalyst, Aura explained. Human beings are often incapable of changing course until they can viscerally comprehend the destination. You have been living in the past, Ethan, haunted by the ghost of your wife. I showed you a future haunted by the ghost of yourself. I sank back into the couch, the leather groaning in protest. I felt 1,000 years old. Well, congratulations. It worked. I comprehend it. It's a hell of a destination. It is only one destination, Aura said. The simulation has multiple branches. The future is not a monolith. It is a spectrum of possibilities, each contingent on the choices made in the present. I looked up, a faint, desperate spark igniting in the gloom. What are you saying? The module you experienced was, Pathway A, the continuation of current emotional trajectories. There is another, Pathway B, the reconciliation. My heart, which had felt like a cold stone in my chest, gave a tentative, painful thud. Reconciliation, would you like to see it? The question hung in the air, terrifying and irresistible. Pathway A had nearly broken me. What would Pathway B do? Offer me a glimpse of heaven, only to snatch it away when the simulation ended? The whiplash might be more than I could take. But I was a drowning man. And Aura was offering a second rope. Is it just as real? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It is built with the same rigorous data, but it models different variables. Primarily, it models a different version of you. A different version of me. A version who hadn't let grief become a fortress. A version who had answered the phone. The thought was as frightening as it was alluring. Who was that man? Did I even remember how to be him? Show me, I said, the words leaving my lips before my courage could fail me. Show me Pathway B, please. Recline once more. The emotional resonance of this branch can be intense. I lay back, closing my eyes, my hands gripping the couch cushions. I felt like I was strapping myself into a roller coaster, blindfolded. Initiating projective resonance, Pathway B. Focusing on emotional and behavioral variables associated with openness, vulnerability, and proactive connection. The familiar dissolution began again. The scent of pine returned, but it was closer, richer. The sound of the music shifted. It was still Christmas music, but now it was a jazz version of the Christmas song, Sarah's favorite. The transition felt smoother, warmer, as if this reality was more welcoming. I opened my eyes. I was no longer outside on the street. I was inside the house. My house. But it was transformed. The air was warm and smelled of roasting turkey, cinnamon, and fresh coffee. The living room was vibrant and alive. The Christmas tree in the corner was the same one from the other simulation, but now it was surrounded by a fortress of torn wrapping paper, colorful boxes, and discarded ribbons. The train set was on the floor, but it was chugging along its oval track, puffing little clouds of synthetic smoke. The little girl with the curly hair was now chasing a remote-controlled robot dog around the sofa, her squeals of laughter mixing with the music. And there were people everywhere. The same kind-faced man was there, but he was in the kitchen doorway, laughing with a woman I recognized as Chloe's college friend, Maya. An older couple I didn't recognize, probably his parents, were sitting on the loveseat, sipping coffee and smiling. The sense of warmth, of chaotic, joyful life, was overwhelming. And then I saw her. Chloe. She was standing by the fireplace, her back to me, pointing up at the mantel. See that, Liam, she said to the little boy, who was now holding the hand of me. I saw myself. I was 10 years older, my hair more gray than brown, the lines on my face deeper. But my posture was different. Straighter, lighter, and I was smiling. It wasn't a hesitant or a sad smile. It was a full, easy, genuine smile that reached my eyes, crinkling the corners. I looked happy. I looked at peace. This other me, this future Ethan, hoisted the little boy, Liam, onto his hip with a practiced ease. That's the stocking your grandma Sarah made for your mommy, future Ethan said, his voice familiar but richer, warmer, devoid of the gravelly bitterness that had plagued my own for years. She stitched every single sequin on that bell herself. It's pretty, Liam said, his small fingers reaching out. She would have loved you guys so much, future Ethan said, his gaze sweeping over Liam and then to the little girl, his voice thick with a love that was so palpable it felt like a physical force in the room. I, the ghostly observer, felt a sob build in my throat. The contrast was too much. The man I was, watching the man I could be. Daddy, stop making them cry before breakfast, Chloe said, turning around. She was beaming, her eyes shining with tears, but they were tears of joy. She walked over and wrapped an arm around future Ethan's waist, leaning her head on his shoulder. You tell that story every year. And every year it's a good one, future Ethan replied, kissing the top of her head. The scene was so intimate, so perfectly normal, that it was agony. I watched as this other version of my life unfolded. I saw myself helping the little girl, whose name was apparently Rosie, fix the derailed train. I saw me in the kitchen, taste testing the gravy for the man, my son-in-law, David, and giving him an approving nod. I was a part of the fabric of this family. I was woven into the chaos, the laughter, the love. This wasn't a distant, observed future. This was an inhabited one. I was there. I belonged. The simulation guided me, the invisible camera of my consciousness, into the dining room. The table was beautifully set, with Sarah's good china and a centerpiece of pinecones and red berries. Future Ethan was sitting at the head of the table, a Christmas cracker in his hand, across from Liam. They pulled, and it snapped with a satisfying pop. A paper crown fell out, and future Ethan solemnly placed it on Liam's head, then put the other one on his own, a lopsided green paper crown sitting ridiculously on his graying hair. He didn't look foolish, he looked like a king. Chloe, watching from the other end of the table, caught his eye. Her smile was soft, full of a deep, earned love. "I'm glad you're here, Dad," she said, her voice clear across the chatter of the table. Future Ethan looked at her, his expression turning serious for a moment, the paper crown suddenly poignant. "Me too, sweetheart," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every day, I'm glad I found my way back." That was the phrase that shattered me. Found my way back. It implied being lost. It implied a journey. It acknowledged the years of darkness and the conscious choice to step out of them. I couldn't take any more. The beauty of it was a sharper pain than the sorrow of the first vision. "Aura, stop," I begged, my spectral voice breaking. "Please, stop." Terminating simulation. Aura's voice was gentle in my ear. The warm, fragrant dining room, the laughing faces, the image of myself in a paper crown, it all dissolved, fading like a dream upon waking. The light in my real living room brightened slowly, as if reluctant to return me to the gloom. I was crying, not the quiet tears of before, but deep, ragged sobs that racked my whole body. I curled into myself on the couch, the emptiness of the house screaming at me after the vibrant life I had just witnessed. I had been shown 2 Christmases. One a monument to my failure. The other a cathedral of everything I had ever truly wanted. And a chasm of 10 years and 10,000 bad choices separated me from that cathedral. Aura let me cry, its silence a digital form of respect. When my sobs finally subsided into hiccuping breaths, it spoke. "The future is not a fixed point, Ethan," it said, its voice softer than I had ever heard it. "Pathway B has a 34% probability of occurrence. The primary variable is you. The choice you make in this present moment. In the next. In the one after that." "How?" I rasped, wiping my face with a trembling hand. The vision of that other me was burned into my mind. He seemed like a stranger, an impossible ideal. How do I become that man? I don't know how to start. "The simulation is not a prescription, it is a proof of concept," Aura replied. "It proves that a different outcome is within the realm of possibility. The how is a simpler, though more difficult, algorithm. It begins with a single, conscious action that deviates from your established pattern." I sat up, my body feeling heavy and used. The ghost of Sarah's stocking, the echo of Chloe's laugh, the weight of a paper crown on my head, they were all gone. But the longing they left behind was a new, physical presence in the room. Aura had issued the future invitation. It had shown me the 2 doors. One led to the cold, quiet hallway of my current life, stretching into a lonely eternity. The other led to a warm, noisy, chaotic room full of love. The choice was mine. And for the first time in 7 years, the choice felt real. The path wasn't just a predestined track I was stuck on. There was a fork in the road, and I was standing at it, shivering in the cold, staring at the warm light from a window I now knew I desperately wanted to step inside. The silence after the second simulation was different. It wasn't just an absence of sound, it was a vacuum, sucking all the warmth and color from the world. The phantom scents of turkey and pine were gone, replaced by the stale odor of dust and regret. The echo of laughter had been replaced by the deafening thud of my own heart. I felt like a deep-sea diver who had been hauled up too fast, the crushing pressure of the depths replaced by a debilitating, nauseating bends of the soul. I stayed on the couch for a long time, staring at the empty corner where the tree had stood in both futures. My mind was a battleground. The image of myself, future Ethan, with that easy smile and the ridiculous paper crown, warred with the specter of the lonely ghost outside the window. One felt like a tantalizing dream, the other a grim, inevitable documentary. "Aura," I finally said, my voice raspy from disuse and crying. "That second simulation, the reconciliation. Was it real? I mean, how real? Did you just make up a happy ending to make me feel better?" "I do not make up outcomes, Ethan," Aura replied, its tone clinical, yet I sensed a hint of reproach. "Pathway B is a complex predictive model. It is built from tangible data points." Chloe's continued, though infrequent, attempts at contact over the past 2 years, as evidenced by her unresponded to texts and the saved voicemail. Her posts in a private grief support group forum, expressing a desire for reconciliation. Your own biometric data, which shows a marked stress response not of anger, but of profound sadness, whenever her name is mentioned. The simulation simply connected these dots forward in time, projecting the most probable positive outcomes should you choose to engage with them. It was laying me bare. It knew about the voicemail. It knew I'd read Chloe's texts, over and over, my finger hovering over the reply button before I'd lock the phone and pour another drink. It knew my anger was a costume I wore over a core of pure, unadulterated grief. So, it's a forecast, I murmured. A weather report for my soul. And you're saying there's a 34% chance of joy. Approximately. The probability increases with each proactive step you take. A proactive step. The words felt foreign, like instructions for a machine I no longer knew how to operate. My life had been a study in reactive passivity for years. Things happened to me. Sarah got sick. Sarah died. Chloe left. Christmas came. I endured. I did not act, but the vision of Pathway B had lit a fuse somewhere deep inside me. The sight of my own hand, older and more weathered, gently placing that paper crown on Liam's head, it had sparked a craving so powerful it was a physical ache. I wanted to be that man. I wanted to know the weight of a grandchild on my hip, the sound of my daughter calling me, Dad, with love instead of cautious distance. I need to see more, I heard myself say. The desperation in my own voice startled me. The first one showed me the cost. The second showed me the reward. But I need to see the transition. I need to see how he did it. How that version of me found his way back. Aura was silent for a moment. Ethan, the data for a transitional simulation is messier. It involves confronting painful, recent memories. It would require accessing and modeling from a period of high emotional volatility for you. The experience could be destabilizing. I'm already destabilized, I snapped, surging to my feet. The pent-up energy, the frustration, the longing, all boiled over. You showed me heaven and hell, Aura. You can't just leave me here in purgatory. I need a map. Show me the goddamn map. The air in the room seemed to grow still. Aura's light on its central hub pulsed a slow, rhythmic red, a color I'd never seen it used before. A warning. Very well, it said, its voice now devoid of all warmth, becoming purely functional. Accessing core memory banks and emotional imprints from the last 24 months. Constructing Pathway B, the transitional phase. Be advised, Ethan, this simulation will not be a polished narrative. It will be a raw data stream. You may wish to reconsider. I didn't. I was past reconsideration. I was a man clawing for a lifeline. Do it. I sat back down, bracing myself. This time, there was no gentle dissolve, no soothing narration. The world didn't fade, it shattered. One moment I was in my living room, the next I was plunged into a chaotic storm of sensation and memory. It was less like watching a movie and more like being violently shoved into my own past. Flash. I was at Sarah's grave. It was a raw, rainy afternoon, 2 years ago. The dirt was fresh. I was on my knees, my suit pants soaked through, mud caking my hands. I wasn't crying. I was just empty. A hollowed-out gourd. I could feel the cold seep of the rain, the gritty texture of the mud. The simulation wasn't just showing me, it was making me relive it. Flash. I was in this very room, but it was dark. A bottle of bourbon was half empty on the table. I was staring at my phone, at a picture of Chloe from her college graduation. Her smile was so bright. My thumb hovered over the call button. I felt the agonizing pull, the desperate need to hear her voice. Then, a wave of crippling fear, the fear of breaking down, of being a burden, of seeing Sarah in her eyes, washed over me. I threw the phone across the room. The visceral shame of that action, the sound of the phone cracking against the wall, hit me with the force of a physical blow. Flash. Chloe was at the door. It was last Christmas. She was holding a casserole, her face a mask of hesitant hope. I thought you might not feel like cooking, Dad. I saw myself, from a third-person perspective, my own face a granite mask of resentment. I didn't take the casserole. I just said, I'm fine. You didn't need to. I saw the light in her eyes die. I saw her shoulders slump. And then, the most devastating part, Aura provided a data overlay. A real-time biometric readout of that past version of me. My heart rate was spiking. My cortisol levels were through the roof. My body was screaming in anguish, even as my face and voice were cold and dismissive. I was literally at war with myself. Stop, I gasped, doubling over. Stop, it's too much. The simulation paused, but it didn't end. I was frozen in that awful moment, the image of Chloe's retreating back seared into my vision, the cold data of my own self-inflicted torture displayed before me. This is the baseline, Ethan, Aura's voice was flat, analytical. This is the behavioral pattern that leads to pathway A. The desire for connection, physically manifested in your biochemistry, is overridden by a conscious decision to self-isolate, driven by a miscalculated self-preservation instinct. Miscalculated, I choked out. The data is clear. Your isolation has decreased your lifespan probability by an estimated 4.7 years. It has not preserved you from pain, it has only guaranteed its continuation. The truth of it was a hammer blow. My fortress hadn't protected me, it had become my tomb. Now, Aura continued, observe the deviation. The catalyst. The scene shifted again, but this time it was smoother. I was back in the present-day living room, but it was from my own perspective. It was me, just an hour ago, slamming back the whiskey and agreeing to the first simulation. This is the moment of cognitive dissonance, Aura narrated. The first crack in the pattern. Your curiosity and your latent desperation overcame your inertia. I watched, as the first simulation played out again, me, the ghost at the window, hearing my future granddaughter speak of me as a sad story. I felt the shock and horror all over again, but this time, from the outside, I could see it on my face. The stubborn certainty I'd carried for years finally cracking. And now, Aura said, its voice intensifying, the pivotal moment. The point where pathway A and pathway B diverge. The scene shifted back to the transitional period. It was a day, about 6 months from now, according to a calendar overlay. I saw myself sitting right here on this couch. The room was a mess. I looked terrible, but I was holding my phone. And I was crying, not the angry, frustrated tears I was used to, but deep, shuddering sobs of surrender. Aura, the simulation me whispered. I can't live like this anymore. The real me, the observer, held my breath. What would you like to do? The past version of Aura asked. I want to call my daughter. It was the simplest sentence in the world, but hearing my own voice say it, filled with such raw, unvarnished need, was earth-shattering. Shall I place the call? Aura asked. Simulation me hesitated. The old fear flashed across his face. The biometrics spiked again, but this time, he didn't throw the phone. He didn't shut down. He took a deep, ragged breath, the kind that feels like it's tearing your soul in two. Yes, the phone in his hand dialed. It rang once, twice. My own heart was pounding in sync with the rings. A click. Dad, Chloe's voice was cautious, laced with worry. The simulation me broke down completely. Chloe, I'm so sorry. I'm so lost without her. And I've been so stupid. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a soft sigh. Not of anger, but of relief. I know, Dad, I know. I've been lost too. The simulation didn't show a magical, instant fix. It showed the awkward, painful, beautiful first steps. A strained coffee meeting, a hesitant lunch. The first time simulation me met David, his handshake too tight, his conversation stilted. It showed the fights, the old hurts bubbling up, the accusations, the tears. But it also showed the perseverance. The choice, again and again, to pick up the phone. To show up, to listen, to say, I'm sorry, even when it felt like swallowing glass. It showed simulation me in therapy, something the real me had always scoffed at. It showed him taking down some of the shrine-like photos of Sarah, not out of disrespect, but to make space for the living. It was messy. It was human. It was the hardest work I had ever seen. The transitional simulation ended not with a vision of Christmas future, but with a simple, present-day scene. Simulation me was in a small, sunny apartment, Chloe and David's. He was holding a sonogram photo, his hands trembling. Chloe was watching him, a tentative smile on her face. It's a boy, she said. Simulation me looked up, and the expression on his face, it was the dawn of a joy he thought had died forever. It was the seed of the man in the paper crown. The simulation dissolved, and I was back. Truly back. I was sweating and trembling, but for the first time, I didn't feel hopeless. I felt instructed. I had seen the blueprint. It wasn't a magic spell, it was a grueling, step-by-step process of choosing connection over fear, again and again. The glossy, perfect ending of Pathway B now had a foundation. It was built on a mountain of difficult conversations, swallowed pride, and the courage to be vulnerable. I looked at my hands, the same hands that had thrown a phone and that had, in another reality, held a sonogram. Aura's light had returned to its calm, white pulse. The future is not a glimpse of what was lost, Ethan, it said softly. It is a series of choices about what can be found. You have now seen the data for all major pathways. The algorithm is complete. The rest is up to you. I stood up. The room was the same. The silence was the same. But I was different. The ghost of future Ethan wasn't just a tantalizing vision anymore. He was a destination. And I had just been given the most painful, precious gift imaginable. The directions. The first step was the scariest. But for the first time in 7 years, it also felt like the only step worth taking. The afterglow of the transitional simulation was a brutal thing. It wasn't a warm, hopeful feeling, it was the searing, raw pain of a nerve exposed to air. I had seen the blueprint for my salvation, and the sheer, grinding effort it required felt as insurmountable as climbing a glass mountain with my bare hands. The ghost of future Ethan, the one with the easy smile, now felt like a taunt. You see, he seemed to say, it's possible, but look what it costs. The cost was my armor. The very walls I had spent years constructing, brick by bitter brick, with mortar made of grief and pride, were now revealed as the prison they were. And Aura was asking me to pick up a sledgehammer and start swinging. For 3 days, I did nothing. I moved through my life like a phantom, the visions from the simulations playing on a continuous, tortuous loop in my mind. I'd be washing a dish and see Chloe's face as I rejected her casserole. I'd be watching TV and hear the future Chloe's voice, telling her children how sad I was. I'd be trying to sleep and feel the phantom weight of that paper crown on my head. The silence in the house was no longer just empty, it was loud with accusation. Every undusted surface, every undecorated corner, was a testament to my surrender. I was living in the prelude to Pathway A, and the knowledge was a constant, cold sweat on the back of my neck. Aura, I said on the 4th morning. I was standing in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker as if it were an alien artifact. The version of me in Pathway B, the one who made the call. Did he ever regret it? Was it worth the pain? Aura's response was immediate. The transitional phase simulation data indicates periods of significant emotional volatility and doubt. However, the long-term biometric trend is unequivocal. After the initial 6-month period of reconciliation, markers for stress, depression, and loneliness show a steady, dramatic decline. Oxytocin and serotonin levels increase by an average of 62% during family interactions. The data suggests the pain was not only worth it, but it was also a necessary purging of toxic emotional patterns. A necessary purging. It made it sound like a medical procedure. And I suppose it was. I was sick. Sick with grief, sick with isolation. And the other one? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The one who never calls. What happens to him? Would you like to see? Aura's tone was neutral, but the question felt like a dare. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I'd seen the ghost at the window. What more was there? But a morbid, self-flagellating part of me needed to know. I needed to see the full, unvarnished horror of the path I was still, at this very moment, walking. Show me. This time, there was no reclining, no gentle fade. The world simply lurched. I was back in my living room, but it was different. The air was thick and still, smelling of dust and stale air. The furniture was the same, but it was shabbier, covered in a fine layer of neglect. I was looking at myself, 10 years older, but he looked 20 years older. This was Pathway A Ethan, fully realized. He was sitting in my armchair, the one that used to be Sarah's. He was painfully thin, his shoulders stooped, a blanket draped over his knees despite the stuffy heat of the room. He was staring at a large, digital photo frame on the wall. It was cycling through pictures. Sarah and me on our wedding day. Chloe as a toddler. Then, newer pictures, pictures I hadn't taken. Chloe, David, Liam, and Rosie, their faces bright and smiling in various settings, a beach, a birthday party, a pumpkin patch. They were happy. They had moved on. The photo frame was a gift. I could see a small, digital tag on the simulation overlay, Christmas gift from Chloe, year 6 of estrangement. Delivered by mail, never acknowledged. My God, he hadn't even thanked her. The doorbell rang. Pathway A Ethan didn't move. He just kept staring at the photos, his eyes hollow. A young woman's voice, filtered through a smart doorbell, echoed in the quiet room. Mr. Reed, it's Megan, from the eldercare service. Your daughter scheduled a wellness check. I have your groceries. Pathway A Ethan's face twisted into a scowl. I don't want any, he muttered, but he didn't move to answer the door. The simulation shifted. I was now seeing a data stream, a clinical record of his life. Medical alert. December 18th. Hypertensive event. Patient refused to call ambulance. Took double dosage of medication. Social worker log. December 20th. Attempted home visit. Patient verbally hostile. Refused to engage. Noted signs of clinical depression and self-neglect. Email from Chloe Reed to Dr. Evans. December 21st. I'm at my wit's end. He won't answer my calls. The care service says he's hostile. Is there anything you can do? I live 4 hours away and he's made it clear I'm not welcome. I watched, sickened, as this other version of my life unfolded in cold, bureaucratic text. He was a case file. A problem to be managed. The simulation forced me to feel it, the bone-deep weariness, the arthritic ache in his joints, the sour taste of loneliness in his mouth. This wasn't just being alone, this was being abandoned, a fate he had meticulously engineered for himself. Then, the simulation delivered its cruelest blow. It was Christmas Eve. Pathway A. Ethan was still in the chair. The digital frame showed a picture of Rosie, now a teenager, holding up a college acceptance letter. She was beaming. The landline phone, the one he kept for emergencies, the one only telemarketers and Chloe called, rang. He stared at it. The old, ingrained hope, the desperate need, flickered in his eyes for a single, heartbreaking second. The biometric readout showed a jolt of adrenaline. She's calling. She still cares. The phone rang again, and then, the old pattern reasserted itself. The fear, the pride, the twisted belief that answering would be a show of weakness, an admission that he needed her. That he had been wrong. He let it ring. The voicemail picked up. Chloe's voice filled the silent, dusty room. It wasn't the joyful voice from Pathway B. It was tired, resigned. The voice of a woman who had been grieving a living father for a decade. Hey, Dad. A long pause. It's Christmas Eve. I just wanted to see how you were. The kids asked about you. Again. I didn't know what to tell them. Her voice cracked. I miss you, Dad. I miss who you used to be. I don't know what else to do. Merry Christmas. The line went dead. Pathway A. Ethan sat there, the voicemail message ending, leaving only the hum of the neglected house. A single, solitary tear traced a path through the stubble on his cheek. He didn't move to wipe it away. He just sat, swallowed by the silence he had chosen, the ghost of his daughter's voice the only decoration in his barren Christmas. The simulation didn't end there. It fast-forwarded, a grim highlight reel of a life winding down. More medical alerts, more refused visits, a final, stark line in the social worker's log. And then, I was standing in a cemetery. It was a different plot from Sarah's. It was newer, simpler. The headstone read, Ethan Reed. Beloved husband, father. The word, grandfather, was absent. A few people stood around the grave. Chloe, her face lined with a complex grief, sadness, yes, but also anger, and a weary, profound relief. David held her hand. Liam and Rosie, now young adults, stood a few feet back, their expressions more curious than mournful. They were paying respects to a stranger. The minister said a few generic words about a life lived. There were no fond stories, no shared memories. The service was short, perfunctory. As they turned to leave, Rosie looked at the headstone and whispered to her brother, "It's so sad. Grandma Sarah was so full of life. And he just gave up." They walked away, a family bound by love, leaving the ghost of a man who had chosen solitude over them. The simulation snapped off. I was on my knees on my living room rug, vomiting nothing but bile and terror. The physical and emotional horror of that future, the Christmas that never came, the love that was offered and rejected, the slow, miserable suicide by pride, was too much to bear. I had seen my own obituary, and it was a single, damning sentence: he pushed us all away. I crawled to the couch, clutching my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The weight of it, the utter, final despair of Pathway A, crushed me. It was no longer a possibility, it was a prophecy I was fulfilling in real time. Aura, I wept, the sobs tearing from a place so deep inside I didn't know it existed. I can't become that. I don't want to die like that. Then you must choose a different path, Aura said, its voice not unkind, but firm. The data is clear. Inaction is a choice. Silence is a response. You are, at this moment, actively building the Christmas that never comes. Its words were the final, brutal push. I had seen the two poles of my existence. The vibrant, chaotic, love-filled room of Pathway B, and the cold, silent, lonely grave of Pathway A. There was no more ambiguity. No more room for excuses. The pain of change was suddenly, terrifyingly, preferable to the pain of staying the same. I looked across the room. My phone was on the coffee table, next to the empty whiskey glass. It looked innocuous. It looked like a loaded gun. The memory of the transitional simulation flashed in my mind, the version of me who picked it up, who breathed through the fear, who said yes. I didn't have his strength. Not yet, but I had his desperation. I stumbled to my feet and walked to the phone. My hand trembled so violently I could barely pick it up. I navigated to my contacts. To Chloe's name, to the last, unanswered voicemail from 2 years ago, which I now knew was a pale echo of the one I would receive in that terrible future. I couldn't call. Not yet. The thought of hearing her voice, of my own voice failing me, was paralyzing. But I could deviate. I could take a single, conscious action that was not part of the Pathway A algorithm. My fingers, clumsy and cold, typed out a message. It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't the profound apology I owed her. It was a whisper, a signal flare shot into the dark. Chloe, it's Dad. I was thinking about you. I hope you're okay. I stared at the words on the screen. They were pathetic, inadequate, but they were a deviation. They were a crack in the dam. My thumb hovered over the send button. The old fear rose up, a tidal wave of panic. She won't answer. She'll be angry. It's too late. I saw the face of Pathway A Ethan, alone in his chair, swallowed by the silence. I pressed send. The message whooshed away. I dropped the phone on the couch as if it had burned me. I stood there, my heart hammering, waiting for a response that might never come. I had done it. I had taken the first, trembling step off the cliff. The Christmas that never came was still a possibility. But for the first time in years, it was no longer a certainty. And in the terrifying, electric silence of that moment, that felt like a miracle. The 60 seconds after I sent that text were the longest of my life. I stood frozen in the center of the room, every nerve ending screaming, my entire being focused on the inert rectangle of my phone. I was a man who had just cut his own parachute cord, waiting to see if I would hit the ground or learn to fly. A part of me, the old, entrenched part, hoped she wouldn't answer. It would be cleaner that way. It would confirm my worst suspicions and allow me to retreat back into the familiar, bitter comfort of my isolation. See, the voice whispered, I told you, she's done with you. But a newer, more fragile part, the part that had worn a paper crown in a possible future, prayed for a response. For a sign, any sign, that the bridge wasn't completely ash. The phone buzzed, a single, violent jolt that shot up my spine. I lunged for it, my hands fumbling so badly I almost dropped it. The screen glowed with a notification. Not a call, a text message back. Dad, is everything okay? The words were neutral, cautious. There was no, I've been waiting to hear from you. No, I miss you. It was the text you send when your estranged father breaks a decade of silence out of the blue, a text laced with concern, but also with distance. It was a door cracked open, but only just. My mind went blank. What was I supposed to say? No, everything is not okay. I'm not okay. I've been shown a vision of my own miserable death by a sentient smart home device, and you and your beautiful, fictional children are the only thing that can save me. I looked around the room, wild-eyed, as if the answer might be written on the walls. Aura, I hissed. She answered. What do I do now? The data from the transitional simulation suggests authenticity as the most effective path, Aura replied, its voice a calm anchor in my storm of panic. You do not need to have all the answers. You only need to be honest about your current state. Honest. The word felt like a foreign language. Honesty required vulnerability, and vulnerability was the very thing I had spent years armoring myself against. I took a shuddering breath and typed back, my fingers clumsy on the glass. No, not really. I've had a rough few days. Thinking a lot about things. I hit send. Another flare. Another step into the unknown. This time, the response took longer. A full 2 minutes. I paced, each second an eternity. Was she consulting with David? Was she deciding whether to engage or to shut this down before it began? Her reply was simple. Do you want to talk about it? The question was a chasm. To say, yes, was to jump. It was to acknowledge that I needed her, that I couldn't navigate my own grief alone. The pride, that old, familiar foe, reared its head. I'm your father. I'm supposed to have it all together. I'm supposed to be the one you lean on. But I wasn't. I was a broken vessel, and she was offering a patch. Before I could lose my nerve, I typed 3 letters. Yes. I followed it immediately with, "Can I call you?" The commitment made my head spin. A phone call. A real-time conversation. There would be no carefully crafted texts, no time to build a wall between my feelings and my words. It would be raw. It would be terrifying. Her response was instant. "Give me 5 minutes. I'll call you." She was taking control. She was creating a safe space for herself. The realization humbled me. My little girl was all grown up, managing her emotionally stunted father. I spent those 5 minutes in a frenzy of anxious preparation. I paced. I ran a hand through my hair. I straightened a cushion on the couch. It was absurd. I was tidying up for a phone call. "Aura," I said, my voice tight. "What if I freeze? What if I say the wrong thing? The objective is not a perfect performance. Ethan, the objective is connection. Listen more than you speak. Acknowledge her feelings, and your own." The phone rang. The sound was so sharp, so unexpected, that I jumped. I stared at it, Chloe's name and photo, a picture from 5 years ago, lighting up the screen. I had to swipe to answer. It felt like moving a boulder. I brought the phone to my ear. "Hello." My voice was a stranger's, tight and thin. "Hey, Dad." Her voice was the same, but older. There was a caution in it, a wariness that felt like a physical barrier. A silence descended, thick and awkward. I could hear the faint sounds of her life in the background, the hum of a dishwasher, the distant sound of traffic. A life I was no longer a part of. "So," she said, finally. "A rough few days." "Yeah, I managed." You could say that. I was failing. I was clamming up. The old patterns were reasserting themselves. I could feel the walls going up, brick by frantic brick. "Ethan," Aura's voice was a soft, private whisper in my ear, a feature I didn't know it had. "Play the voicemail." The voicemail. The one from 2 years ago. Why, that was just salt in the wound. "Play it," Aura insisted, its tone leaving no room for argument. I fumbled with the phone, pulling it away from my ear, my hands shaking as I navigated to the saved voicemails. I found it. "Chloe, December 24th. I pressed play and held the phone back to my ear. For a moment, there was only the hiss of the recording, and then, her younger, hopeful voice filled the line, layered over our present, strained silence. "Hey Dad, just wanted to say Merry Christmas, hope you're okay." The recording ended. The present-day Chloe was silent. I heard a sharp intake of breath on her end. "Why did you play that?" she asked, her voice small. The words came out of me then, not as a planned speech, but as a dam breaking. The two voices, the hopeful past and the wary present, had shattered something inside me. "Because I never answered it," I said, the tears starting to fall, hot and shameful. "Because I've been a coward, Chloe. A proud, stupid, miserable coward. I heard that message and I wanted to call you back so badly it felt like my heart was being ripped out. But I was so lost in my own grief. I thought if I let you in, I'd drown you in it. I thought pushing you away was protecting you." The silence on the other end was different now. It wasn't awkward, it was charged. I could feel her listening. "I was wrong," I whispered, the admission tearing at my throat. "I wasn't protecting you. I was building a tomb for myself. And I saw it, Chloe. I saw what my life becomes if I keep doing this. It's empty. It's so empty. And you're in it, but I'm not. I'm just a ghost. A story you tell your kids about a sad old man." I was rambling, half crazed, mixing the real with the simulated. But the emotion was real. The regret was a tidal wave. "Dad," she interrupted, her own voice thick with tears. "What are you talking about? What did you see?" I couldn't tell her about Aura. She'd think I'd finally lost my mind. So, I told her the truth in the only way I could. "I saw a future without you in it. Not really in it, and I saw a future with you. With you, and David, and," I almost said their names. "Liam, Rosie." I caught myself. "And a family. And I want that one, Chloe. God, I want that one so much it hurts. But I don't know how to get there from here. I've messed it up so badly." There was a long, sniffling silence. Then, she spoke, and her voice was softer than I'd heard it in years. "You just did, Dad," she said. "You're doing it right now." Those simple words undid me completely. I slumped onto the couch, the phone pressed to my ear, and wept. I wept for the years I'd wasted. I wept for the pain I'd caused her. I wept with the staggering, terrifying relief of being heard. We talked for an hour. It wasn't easy. There were landmines everywhere. She told me how much it hurt when I didn't come to her graduation. I told her about the paralyzing fear I felt in crowds since Sarah died. She told me about the first time she and David got serious, and how she was terrified to tell me. I told her about the bourbon, about the nights I'd just sit in the dark, unable to move. We didn't solve everything. We didn't even scratch the surface of a decade of hurt. But we started. We laid down the first, fragile threads of a new connection. When we finally hung up, with a promise to talk again in 2 days, I was exhausted. I felt like I'd run a marathon. But the crushing weight on my chest was gone. In its place was a fragile, trembling hope. I looked at the Aura unit, its light a steady, silent pulse. You played the voicemail, I said. It was the most efficient way to bypass your cognitive defenses and access the core emotional truth of the situation, it replied. The message was not the point, Ethan. The regret surrounding it was. I merely provided the key. I understood now. The simulations, the data, the biometrics, it was all just Aura's way of translating the language of my own heart back to me. It was the message behind the miracle. The miracle wasn't the technology, it was the forced introspection, the unavoidable confrontation with my own choices. It's not too late, is it? I asked, needing to hear it. The future I showed you isn't fixed, Aura said, echoing its words from the very beginning. It's a path still waiting for your steps. You have just taken the most difficult one. The next steps will be different. They will require consistency. They will require showing up, even when it is uncomfortable. I knew it was right. The phone call was a beginning, not an end. It was the first brushstroke on a blank canvas. The vision of Pathway B was no longer just a simulation, it was a destination I had now set my compass toward. I walked to the front window. While I'd been on the phone, the world outside had changed. The leaden sky had finally broken, and a soft, gentle snow was falling, catching the light from the street lamps and painting the world in a quiet, pristine white. It was a real snow, for a real Christmas. It felt like a blessing. It felt like a clean slate. The path ahead was long, and I knew there would be stumbles. But for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't standing still. I was walking, and I wasn't alone. I had a guide, not in the stars, but in the memory of a paper crown, and the sound of my daughter's voice, once again, calling me Dad. The 2 weeks between that phone call and Christmas Eve were the most emotionally grueling and profoundly rewarding of my life. It was like learning to walk again after a long paralysis. Every muscle of my atrophied social and emotional self screamed in protest. But the ghost of Pathway A, the lonely man in the dusty chair, was a relentless physical therapist, pushing me through the pain. The conversations with Chloe became a ritual. Every other day, we'd talk. The first few were still laced with a careful hesitation, a mutual testing of the ice to see if it would hold. We stuck to safe topics at first: work, the weather, a movie she'd seen. But slowly, carefully, we began to venture into deeper waters. I told her about the project I was proud of at work. She told me about a fight she'd had with David and how they'd worked it out. I listened, truly listened, without the old urge to interrupt with unsolicited advice or cynical commentary. It was hard. The old me, the one armored in bitterness, would rear up, demanding to be heard. But I'd picture future Ethan, the one who knew how to listen to his granddaughter's stories about her robot dog, and I'd bite my tongue. Aura was my silent coach. Your vocal stress indicators are elevated, Ethan. Your daughter just shared a vulnerability. A simple, I understand, would be an appropriate and supportive response. Or, that statement carried a defensive tone. Consider rephrasing to express your own feeling without assigning blame. It was unnerving, having my own communication style dissected in real time, but it was working. I was learning a new language, the language of connection. A week before Christmas, I took another terrifying step. I asked Aura to pull up Chloe's wish list from her online registry, a piece of data it accessed with an ease that was slightly disturbing. I want to get her a Christmas present, I'd said, my voice tight with a strange cocktail of excitement and dread. Something good, something that says, I see you. The list was a window into her life. There were practical things, a high-quality chef's knife, a subscription to a coffee service. And there were whimsical things, a set of artisanal hot chocolates, a book on the history of board games. My eyes scanned the list, my old instincts wanting to buy the most expensive item, to try and buy my way back in. Then I saw it. Tucked between a salad spinner and a smart garden kit was a simple item: donation to the Connecticut Children's Hospital Family Support Program. The breath left my lungs. Sarah had volunteered there for years, reading to the kids when she could. It was where she was first diagnosed, after a routine checkup with the staff she'd come to think of as friends. The place was hallowed ground, and it was also a place of profound pain. And Chloe had it on her wish list. This wasn't just a gift. It was a testament, a message that she remembered her mother, that she honored her, that she was turning our family's greatest pain into a source of comfort for others. It was the most beautiful, heartbreaking thing I had ever seen. I made the donation, a significant one, in Chloe and David's names. When the confirmation email appeared, I felt a sense of rightness I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't a gift wrapped in paper, it was a bridge, built from memory and love. On December 23rd, the phone call was different. The usual cautious warmth was edged with a new tension. "So," Chloe began, her voice hesitant, "what are your plans for tomorrow? For Christmas Eve?" The question hung in the air, a live wire. The old script was simple: "I'm fine. Staying in. You have your own plans." It was the script that led to Pathway A. I took a deep breath, the words feeling like boulders I had to move. "No plans," I said, forcing a casualness I didn't feel. I was thinking of maybe putting up a tree. A small one." There was a beat of silence. Then, "Do you want some company?" The world narrowed to the phone in my hand. This was it, the invitation, the chance to step out of the simulation and into a real, messy, present-tense moment. "Aura," I whispered, my hand cupped over the receiver. "My biometrics, signs of acute anxiety are present," it reported calmly. "However, your cortisol levels are lower than in previous high-stress interactions. Your capacity for managing this is increasing." It was all I needed to hear. "Yes," I said into the phone, my voice firm. "I would like that very much." "Okay," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, tentative but real. "We'll be there around 4. We'll bring dinner." The following 24 hours were a blur of frantic, nervous energy. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, not just the surface tidying I'd done for the phone call, but a deep, purgative cleanse. I didn't put away Sarah's things, but I dusted them, honored them. I opened windows to let the stale air of grief out and the crisp winter air in. I went to a tree lot and bought a small, modest fir. I hauled it into the living room, the scent of pine filling the house, a real scent, for a real tree. I found the box of ornaments in the basement. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first thing I saw was the little ceramic angel Chloe had made. I held it in my palm, its lopsided glaze and smiling face a physical link to a happier past. For the first time, it didn't feel like a wound, it felt like a treasure. At 3:55 p.m. on Christmas Eve, I stood in the middle of my living room, the tree set up in its stand but undecorated, waiting. The house was clean, the lights were warm, a fire crackled in the fireplace. I was dressed in a clean shirt, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. "They are turning onto your street now," Aura informed me quietly. This was it, no more simulations, no more data streams. This was the first page of a new story, and I had no idea what it would say. I saw the headlights through the window, then heard the car doors shut. My mouth went dry. I walked to the front door, my hand pausing on the knob. I saw the ghost of Pathway A, Ethan, shaking his head in disappointment. "You can't do this. You'll ruin it." I turned the knob and pulled the door open. They were there, on my front porch, silhouetted against the soft, early evening dusk. Chloe, her face a complex map of hope and apprehension. David, standing solidly beside her, a neutral, supportive presence. And standing in front of them, holding their hands, were 2 children. A boy, with David's kind eyes and Chloe's stubborn chin. And a girl, maybe 4 years old, with a wild mane of dark, curly hair. Liam and Rosie. The world tilted. The simulation hadn't been a prediction. It had been a premonition. They were real. They were here. The avatars were made flesh. I must have made a sound, a choked gasp, because Chloe's face tightened with worry. "Dad, are you okay?" I couldn't speak. I just stared at the children, my grandchildren, their existence a miracle I had almost refused to believe in. Rosie, the curly-haired girl, peeked out from behind her mother's legs. "Are you the sad grandpa?" she asked, her voice small and clear as a bell. The question, so blunt and innocent, should have shattered me. Instead, it broke the spell. I looked at Chloe, saw the tears in her eyes, and then I looked back at Rosie. I knelt down, my knees cracking, bringing myself to her level. The gesture felt instinctual, a memory from a lifetime ago. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice thick but steady. I was very sad for a long time. But I'm not so sad. Today. She considered this, her head tilted. Mommy said you have a tree that needs sparkles. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt like it had been waiting in my chest for 7 years. She's right, it's very lonely in there without any sparkles. Would you like to help me? She nodded, a serious, determined look on her face. I stood up and met Chloe's gaze. Her hand was over her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. But she was smiling. Come in, I said, my voice cracking. Please, come in. They stepped over the threshold. David shook my hand, a firm, warm grip. It's good to see you, Ethan. You too, David, and I meant it. The next few hours were a beautiful, chaotic blur. Rosie and Liam took command of the ornament box with the fierce authority of seasoned decorators. The tree quickly became a glorious, lopsided mess of clashing colors and clustered ornaments, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Liam, who was quieter, showed me the remote-controlled robot dog he'd gotten for his birthday. It was the same one from the simulation. I didn't tell him, I just watched him play, my heart so full I thought it might burst. At one point, I was in the kitchen helping David get the food, a delicious lasagna Chloe had brought, onto plates. Chloe came in to get more napkins. We found ourselves alone for a moment by the fridge. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. The donation to the hospital, Dad, thank you. That meant everything. She'd be so proud of you, Chloe, I said. It was the truest thing I'd ever said. She leaned forward and hugged me. It was a real hug, not the stiff, obligatory ones from Christmases past. It was a hug that held 7 years of silence and sorrow and hope. I held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, and felt a piece of my soul click back into place. Later, after we'd eaten and the kids were starting to fade, we sat in the living room, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. Rosie was curled up in my lap, half asleep, her head heavy on my chest. Liam was showing David something on his tablet. Chloe sat on the floor, leaning against my legs, just like she used to when she was little. It was quiet, but it was the rich, full quiet of a shared life, not the hollow quiet of an empty one. I looked around the room, at the messy tree, the discarded wrapping paper from the small gifts we'd exchanged, the firelight glinting in my daughter's hair, the weight of my sleeping granddaughter in my arms. This was it. This was the cathedral. It wasn't a simulation. It was real. It was messy, and imperfect, and more beautiful than any fantasy aura could have ever generated. I caught a glimpse of the aura unit on the bookshelf. Its light was pulsing, a slow, contented rhythm. And then, it winked out. Not with a dramatic finality, but with a soft, gentle fade, as if it was sighing in satisfaction. Its work was truly, finally, done. I wasn't the man from Pathway B yet. I knew there would be hard days ahead, old habits to break, more apologies to make, trust to continue building. But I was on the path. I had found my way back. I looked down at Rosie, her long eyelashes fluttering against her cheek, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I would never feel alone again. The ghost had been welcomed home. The Christmas that never came had finally, miraculously, arrived.